got the audio. Some lost the share and didn't get the audio later. I got a number of calls during the week from people who said, no, you got to pick up here, you got to pick up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back a little bit, just a little bit, to try to fill in the gaps. The people who are here in the shul, who had heard this all the way through, well, please have to excuse me and bear with it. We do have a new person here in the shul listening to the share today, so he'll benefit from it. So let's go. I want to start in your handouts for the people here on the shul. I'm on a page 90. It's on the bottom of the sheet. It says page 90. Okay. For those of you who are listening at home, I'm in Bereshis, Pasha Lamed Ches. We're talking about the story of Yehuda and Tamar, and we're working through those issues that Yehuda faced in its quest to become the leader of Bnei Israel for the dynasty that he was setting up, which would ultimately result in the kingship of David HaMelech. So just a very, very fast review for those of you who are joining us for the first time. Good morning, Charlie. Those of you who are joining us for the first time. Yehuda had managed to separate himself from his family in the house of Yaakov, of course, of the whole incident of his involvement in the selling of Yosef. He went through the reasons that he may have had to separate himself from his family. In any event, he tried to recreate a life for himself in another section of Canaan with his friend Chira, went into the business of sheep shearing, became very, very wealthy in a quick succession, found a woman to marry. She gave birth to 3 children. Heir number 1 dies because of his failure to consummate marriage with Tamar properly. Onan likewise dies very, very quickly because of his also failure to perform properly the mitzvah of Yibum. Some additional time goes by. Yehuda loses his wife, okay, and he's in an intense period of mourning. While this was going on, he had made a promise, which we spoke about, which probably he never felt he was going to fulfill. He made a promise to Tamar to stay home, okay, and wait for son number 3, Shelah, to become old enough to become of marriageable age, and he would be the one to perform Yibum, to free up from her chained position, where in those times you could not do anything as long as there was some male member of the family of the deceased husband. And we spoke about Yehuda not really having any intentions of fulfilling that duty that he had upon him to somehow do right by his daughter-in-law, Tamar. And a couple of years has gone by. Seems to be doing nothing about the situation. Tamar is sitting home in the house. Nothing much is happening with her. She can't get on with her life. Yehuda finally gets over all the grief that he has following the loss of his 2 children and his wife, and he presents himself with Chira at a sheep shearing event, which was a joyous festive occasion, which we spoke about. There was drinking going on there and partying going on there, which was a remez, a symbol that Yehuda was getting back into the world, and he was throwing off his mourning period. So I want to pick up sentence 12. Okay, you please bear with me. Some of this is still repetition. Sentence 12. I'll go through it very, very quickly. Vayirbu hayomim. A period of 2 years went by. But Tamat Batshuesh is Yehuda, and his wife dies. By Yinachim Yehuda, and after a period of time, Yehuda finished his mourning period. By Yaal, Al Gozazait shall know who Bechira Reyehu Adolamitim Nasa. Okay, so there he's going up. He has his retinue. He's traveling with Chira. Yehuda being a leader, being there. Morning, Yehuda being there. Travels with not by himself. He has Chira and he has other people because he was a judge. He was a shofet where he lived. Okay, and he's had a good time at this party. But you got with Tamar, so this now, Tamar, meanwhile, has been sitting home all this period of time, and she's waiting for Yehuda to fulfill his obligation, which is to bring Shelah to her for to perform Yibum. And he's not doing it. But you got with Tamar Lemor, so it's reported to Tamar, that Yehuda is back in society. His period of mourning is over, and he's involving himself again in worldly things. But big day, so she takes off all the her widow's weeds, okay? And she veils herself. She puts a veil on. Okay? She sits in a place called Pesach Einayim. In those days, now, when we travel, we have road markers and we have street signs. Those days, where there were no road markers or street signs, what they would do is they would take a big boulder, a rock, or a stone, and they'd write something on it, carve something out of it to indicate where the road was going. So she was sitting at the crossroads, so Pesach Einayim, between the two stones, one for each of the roads, it looked like there was like an entrance or a door, whatever you want to call it figuratively. And she's sitting there, okay. She saw Ki Godal Shelah, that Shelah had become of marriageable age. And Yehuda was doing nothing to fulfill the obligation and to remove her period of being, so to speak, like an aguna. Now, it's a very interesting chazal I came across this week. I didn't have it for last week's share, but I came across exactly where Tamar was sitting, okay, going all the way back to Abraham Avinu, after he had his bris milah, who Yoshev Pesach Ohel Kechom Hayom. So Chazal says she was sitting in the exact same crossroads that Abraham Avinu was sitting in, waiting for, when the Malachim came to be the bigger Mavak Chol for him. So it's an interesting thing. I saw it, not germane to the shear, but it's just, she was sitting there. Yeah. The question. Where did I see that? I forget already. I think I read it in Meyam Lo Ways, and I forgot where Meyam Lo Ways brings it down from. Okay? I'll try to get it to you. Yeah. Okay, so it's more than the question was, does this word Pesach Einayim have a double meaning? And I want to say to you, yes, right? It's a crossroads. Figuratively and otherwise, where is Tamar now? She has to make a big decision, right? As to what to do. So she's sitting at the crossroads, so to speak, of her life. Okay? The crossroads of her life. Whatever decision she's going to make is going to affect the rest of her life. So she's at a crossroads. She's got to really decide what to do. Okay, so obviously she knew what she was doing. We're going to get there right now. So the last point we covered for last week, before we lost the electric here in the shul, was what was Tamar's motivation? We spoke about could have been one of four different plans. Plan number one, she was going to sit there and very nicely and respectfully, when Yehuda passed by with his retinue of people, she was going to let him see that she's sitting there and maybe nicely speak to him and remind him of his obligations, where it has to be. Okay. Secondly, she was going to confront him angrily and say to him, you've left me in my house for 2 years. Shaylor is big. He's getting ready to be married. Okay. You're not doing anything about it. I'm not going to stand for this anymore. So option 2 was to confront him. Option 3 was, and we spoke last week about some of the halachas that existed at that time for Yibum, any male descendant or survivor of the dead person, okay, in this case, Onan, any male was able to perform Yibum. Once the Torah was given, Torah came to limit that to only like a brother. But in the times that Yehuda lived, and in that society, even for the non-Jews, Yibum was able to be performed by any male survivor, and Yehuda was in fact a male survivor. It was his father-in-law. We look at that today later on, that while we're talking about this, is almost like a sexual relationship, but in those times it was not considered that. So plan number 3 was for her to say, okay, you don't want to act with Shayla, I'm going to entice you, I'm going to seduce you, and you're going to be the one to perform Yibum. Okay? Plan number 4 was that what she was going to do is she was going to confront Yehuda, but say to him, you're not fulfilling your obligation. I'm going to take a very, very bold step, and I am freeing myself. I don't want any Yibum. I don't want to be involved with any of you or your family, and I'm just walking away. So when the thing went down last week, we were discussing, what do we think was her motivation? What was her motivation? What would you say? Anybody listening at home?
Yeah, she was out to entice him. Her best plan was to entice him.
All right, so Rita postulates that she was sitting there to say enough is enough.
And because she knew that you would have meant to share his son, so obviously she knew he's going to go that way. She was waiting for him. I see that.
Okay, so Rita postulates that she was there. Probably what we want to say, I think Rita's answer probably includes all of them. She was looking at this point to have a life-changing event. Whatever was going to happen, the result was that she wanted to be freed from her almost like an aguna position. She was tired of sitting home. So it was one of 4 ways she was going to carry this out. Bob?
Hello?
Yaakov came 4 years ago. This is not true. According to say, he wanted to be recognized. He wanted to be found out. He wanted to be unmasked. Maybe she also really was hoping to be unmasked and have the whole confrontation.
Yeah, that was, Bob, you suggest that her goal was pretty much like pretty much like Ada said, that her goal was somehow she was going to remove herself from this awful position that she found herself. She wasn't really trying to hide who she was. She was very, very bold in saying who she was. She was not hiding herself from Yehuda.
I don't know if Catherine
What's that? One at a time.
I don't know if Catherine was her first plan motivation.
Oh, it definitely, Bob says he doesn't think that the plan to have a child with Yehuda was her first motivation. I want to suggest to you that it was her only motivation. Because if her motivation was to seduce him and to have sex with him, Yibum is a very, very difficult concept to grasp. Yibum cannot be performed if there's a sexual desire or out of a lust kind of situation. It has to be l'hakim sheni or give. It has to be purely non-lustful, for want of a better word. Otherwise, the mitzvah of Yibum is not performed properly. So she was just there not to hide herself from him. When she was at the crossroads, she was going to have by hook or crook, her position, her situation, her status in society changed. That was her motivation. Rita, you wanted to ask? So that's why, but you know, she was in disguise. But she wasn't really in disguise.
Marty,
Put on a veil. You know, a veil is the way people went out in those days. I think you know, when women went out, they went out with veils. Not
Marty,
to disguise themselves, but that was the proper sneeristic way to go out. But okay.
hello,
Right.
Marty.
So, let me ask a question which we didn't discuss
Marty.
last week. So
I want
Yehuda
to
comes
mention
to
something. I want to
Corso,
mention something.
right? Yachshavel is owner. What was his motivation? What was his motivation? He could have had a number of motivations. What was his motivation? So the consensus of the people sitting here at this year is that he wanted to have a good time. Okay, his wife had died. Apparently, he hadn't had any sexual relations for a couple of years, and now he sees this woman sitting there on the, you know, on the crossroads, and he becomes very, very lustful. Okay.
Marty.
So there's two. Okay. Let's let that sit, and then when we finish the Shia, we'll see if in fact that was Yehuda's intention all the time. Because if Yehuda's intention, excuse me, he thought she was a prostitute. So Shabtai is saying if she was a prostitute, his intentions were lustful. Okay? His intentions were not pure. His intentions were to perform an Avera. I'll just throw one statement out to you. Okay? I'm not saying you're wrong that that was his intentions. Huh? Okay, so in those times, a person was allowed to approach a zona and to have sex with them, and there was no Torah, and it wasn't against halacha. It wasn't a nice thing to do, but there was no halacha prohibiting it. But I want to say to you, if Yehuda's intention, just think about this as we go through the stories, if Yehuda's intentions were not pure, okay, and Tamar gets pregnant, how could David and the Mashiach come out of that? How could David and the Mashiach come out of that? It doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. It does matter. Okay. Leave that aside. Think about it as we go for the Shia, and maybe the answer, I'll be able to bring out the answer to you. So look at the exact wording. The question is, the Torah calls her a zona. Okay? That's what Shabtai said. The Torah does not call her a zona. Vayachshavel a zona. Yehuda thought she was a zona. Huh? So, okay, so that's a good question. How pure could it be if he thought she was a zona? Okay? All right. So it's a good question, which is a question I have to answer and leave you with the answer. Okay? What? Okay. All right. We'll see. We'll see. Okay? We'll see. All right? We'll see. Okay. Vayirel Yehuda, let's go forward. Vayachshavel is Zonah. In his mind, she's a Zonah. Okay? Ki chisasa poneha. Now, isn't that ridiculous? Ki chisasa poneha, because her face is covered. She was out there as a tznius woman, sitting in a public place, and that was the custom, okay, in that time that women did not go out unveiled. Okay. Vayet eleha. He turned aside for her on the road. Now, Chazal pick up on this word vayet Eloha. What do you mean by yet Eloha? He turned to her. No, a simple reading is he's walking, he sees her, and he turns. But Chazal say that Vayaksha Behel Azona, that he wanted really no part of her. He said, I got to get out of this area. I'm not traveling in a good place. There's a prostitute sitting on the road. I'm in a bad neighborhood. You know, I'm in a place not to be. And Chazal say that as he tried whichever way to get by her and to get away from the whole situation, Vayet Eloha, a malach came down. I'm just repeating your Chazal. Okay, Paula was very skeptical. A malach came down. Okay, and kept pushing him and turning him towards where he couldn't get away from the road, and kept pushing and turning him into her. Okay, you'll look at Chazal. Nobody does. Okay, you'll look at Chazal. Don't shoot me. I'm just telling you. Maybe it's Chazal's attempt to say Yehuda. Maybe it's Chazal's attempt. Let me finish. Maybe it's Chazal's attempt to have Yehuda portrayed not as a derelict that's walking on the road and picks up a prostitute.
They were just pushing their way, so why did they do that?
Okay, let's go. Okay, I'll try to answer all your questions. I promise you I will try to answer all of your questions. And then you could, if you don't like what I have to say, then you could attack. Okay? I want to have a sexual meeting with you. Okay? Now take a look at this word kal also. What's the word for a daughter-in-law? Hebrew. What's the word for a bride? Same word.
But it should have been in the edge.
God, should have been.
Yes, but this is the crap about it.
No. No. So the Torah is hinting to us, okay, again, playing in that Vayet Eloha. And again, this is Chazal. Okay, this is Chazal, this is not me. That for some reason, as soon as Yehuda saw her, okay, he fell in love with her. Through the veil, who was not seeing her, okay, Ki kalaso he. Ki kalaso he. There's no such a thing as love at first sight. Love at first sight, what does that mean? Didn't make a difference. He fell in love like no, he fell in love with her forehead.
Okay.
I understand the negotiation. It's a very difficult issue. I'm just bringing you out all of Chazal, okay? All right? We'll soon see that it could be possible that what was happening here was that he was marrying her. He was going to marry her. Paula, you have to give me some time, okay? Okay? But Tomer, and she says, Matitenli kisavo Eloi. So let's go back. We said there were 4 possibilities that Tamar had, right? Remind him nicely and politely what his obligations were. Number 2, confront him. Number 3, have relations with him so that it could be, she could become pregnant. And 4, to tell him to get lost, forget about this whole thing. Yehuda takes the initiative.
Yehuda takes the initiative.
Getting it. You have to let me develop the theory of color. Okay? All right. Where was I? Okay. Yehuda takes the initiative. He takes the. She's sitting there. She's sitting there. Marty, she's sitting there. Okay? And the first one to speak is Yehuda. Vayomer, and he says, Havanovo Eliach. He's the first one to speak. And what he says is one of her four options, right? It's one of the four options. So option one, she didn't get a chance. Option two, she didn't get a chance. But option three, Yehuda opens up the conversation. He immediately goes, I want to have sort of a sexual meeting with you, okay? And of course, once she says that, okay, if in fact he's a Kala, does a Kala get married without anything? You have to have a Shabbat Pruta, correct? There has to be a Shabbat Pruta to make a marriage, a Jewish marriage. Man has to give the woman something. There was no ketubos in those days. They didn't have a chair, okay? All right. So she says, Matitain li. He said, well, I lie. Give me something, okay? Give me something. We have to operate here, okay, like I said to you, as difficult as the text is, but all of the Chazal force us to understand this story, ultimately, that at least in Tamar's situation, her motives were pure. Her motives were absolutely pure. She knew, because we said Sadka Mimeni at the end, we see her motivations were absolutely pure. That was to get herself out of the situation where she is like an aguna, and to somehow, regardless of what her relationship was with Er and Onan, somehow to have a child to continue Er's legacy. Okay? So her motives were pure. The only one where we have a question with now, which seems somewhat problematical, is with Yehuda. As I said to you, what were his intentions? What was his intentions? Okay? Okay. We're looking at the fact that he thought she was a prostitute. We're looking at that with today's morals. We're looking at it with the moral once the Torah was given. I told you, Chazal and the Ramban, there's a whole discussion on Yibum and what went on in those days. Visiting a prostitute was considered to be perfectly okay. Very hard to wrap ourselves around that because today we know it's not okay. And we're talking about Yehuda. We're talking about the founding of the father of the Davidic dynasty. So how could he do this? Okay? So she says, Mati tenliki savo alai. I got to get something out of it. Okay? You don't have your credit card here with you. You don't have your driver's license here with you. I don't know, you know. Question I asked last week was, how did Yehuda not recognize her voice? It was his daughter-in-law. She had married to two of his sons. Okay? How did Yehuda not recognize her voice? It was what? Okay, so maybe Yehuda was somewhat inebriated. Sometime maybe Yehuda was in a partying mood. He wasn't so careful. We also suggested last week that sometimes if your mind is made up to do a certain thing, you only see what you want to see. Your brain don't work, and other parts of your body somehow take over, right? And he was convinced that he had to somehow have some sort of a sexual relationship with somebody after all these years. So, of course, Tamar was on the road, and his mind was set that he was going to do this, that she was the one. Okay? Okay? All right. Okay? And I give you the Midrash again that says, Vayet. Okay? He kept moving on, but this thing is to understand, this was preordained from Shemayim to happen. This was preordained from Shemayim to happen. Every single Mefarish says that this whole Maisa was preordained from Shemayim to happen. And we'll get into that why. Okay? All right. Okay, so what she says, but Anochi, he says, Anochi Ashalach Yedi Zimin Atzon. You want some money? I don't have any money with me, right? I don't have my credit card. I don't have my wallet with me. I don't even have my driver's license with me. So I'm going to send you a Gedim in Hatzon. I'm going to send you a goat. Goat. But Tomer, she says to him, no good. No good. I want some sort of collateral. Right? Eravon, what? Yeah, I want some collateral. You're going to give me something that's of value. If this is a wedding, it has to be at least one Shava Pruta. So you're going to give me something, right? Vayomer, and he says, okay, I'll do that. What is the collateral that you want? But Tomer, so she says to him, what is that? Staff, but also it's a ring. Chazal will say that Yehuda carried this big ring on his finger that had his stamp on it. And when they did with the sheep, when you had to brand the sheep, he would push his fist into the sheep. So that was the branding. We served both as a ring and as a branding thing. Ushilacha and your sash. A sash. Okay? Like a belt, like a gauntlet, a sash, whatever you call it. Umatcha shebiyodecha. And your staff. Now these were not inconsequential kinds of things. Okay, I'm going to go through what each one of these things represent. Vayiten lo, I'm sorry, he gave it to her. Vayavoy lo vatarlo. Now, what are the odds? Okay, so what are the odds that the first time this man is going to have sexual relations with this woman, that she is going to become pregnant? In Hashemayim, okay? I mean, it's an awful, I mean, you could say it happens, right? First time, you can say it happens, right? But this is leaning towards in Hashemayim. It's even more of a difficult thing to understand. We said that the Er and Onan didn't complete the sexual act. They did something, okay, which was vehicle or kadak, whatever it was, the actual act was not completed, where she was inseminated. Okay, so the question I'll have to ask you, and I don't know the answer to this, was Tamar a virgin at the time?
That's the question. That's the question.
Why? How could it be? But we said, what was their sin? Why did they die?
Right.
The first one we said because they sodomized them, right? I understand, but does it break the virginity in terms of the biological hymen? What's it called that's there? That's a good question.
Yeah,
so
but
the fact, not only she might have been a virgin, makes her conceiving on the first time even more of a biological oddity.
But you would have known that, I think, from recognized that, and that would have set off an alarm.
Why? Remember, we established 2 shiurim ago that Yehuda does not know why Er and Onan died. He doesn't know why they died, because that's one of the reasons he doesn't want to give Sheila to her, because he thinks that she's a man killer.
Black widow, they call it.
Question. So it's a good question. So I'll answer you this way. When Leah and Rachel, when Leah went into the marriage room, okay, Yaakov didn't recognize her. That was at night. Okay, but okay. All right. Let's take what the Torah just says. All right. So now, what has he done? He's given her a Shavei Pruta, certainly, right? More than a Shavei Pruta. Question you have to ask me is where the Eidim are.
What?
So the aid was Chira and the retinue that he was traveling with. That's what the aid. So we have all the things that would suggest that this might be a valid marriage.
Marty,
Okay? We backed into it a little bit. You don't have to accept it. It's okay. I can live with it. I'm still going to have a good lunch today, but you know, you can live with it. All right.
could I ask you a question?
So,
Here.
so also the fact we could also say that maybe the fact that Yehuda could not recognize her voice was another reason that maybe that this whole thing had to take place and was min hashamayim that was happening. Okay, and we'll see that at the end of the story. Okay. Okay. All right. The fact we have to, again, I can't dwell on this enough. The fact that all of Malchus based David is going to come from this particular relationship, from this particular incident, almost forces us to say, there's Gemaras that say the same thing, but it almost forces us to say that this was not, that this was min hashamayim, okay? That this whole thing had to happen. Right? Okay. All right. Now, I want to just talk briefly about, so sidebar, what was Yehuda giving her? What was Yehuda giving her? So I found the following. If you'll indulge me, I'll just read this to you. Okay. The signet ring bore the image of the head of a lion. Right? Now we know Yehuda's tribal thing was a lion, and served double duty as a branding tool for identifying his sheep and his wool. It probably had never left Yehuda's hand for fear of its duplication and used in forging Judah's unique signature. His sash, or his tunic, bore the unique design worn by him and his brothers, recognizable to all as belonging to a person of consequence. Right? And the staff was irreplaceable. I'll tell you a little bit about the staff soon. This was the same staff. You remember the Torah tells us when Yaakov is running away from home, from Esau, and he makes a statement, Keep a Makli, Alvarti as Hayarden Hazeh. So Chazal say that that stick that Yaakov had, apparently somehow Yehuda, and I don't know how this happened, but Yehuda, that was that same stick, right? I was, huh? All right. But Yaakov is not dead, so it can't be a Yerusha. Okay. All right. Now, I want to talk about the Mateh. Okay. The Medrash explains that this staff, okay, is the staff, same staff that Moshe Rabbeinu will use in years to come when he's standing in Paro's court. Right? Same stick. The same staff will match and best the king's necromancers when it morphs into a serpent. Remember, he throws the stick down, turns into a snake, and Moshe's snake eats up all the other snakes. Well, you have to take it up with the Medrash. I'm just bringing it down to you, all right? It's a Medrash, okay? Maybe it's kind of, because it sounds good, all right? It sounds good. When people are falling asleep during a shir, okay. It will turn the Nile waters into blood. Vayet Moshe es Mateu al Hayom, right? Okay. And will perform all manners of signs and wonders. It was also the same stick that Moshe will use at the Yam Suf when he splits it. He stick over, okay? The three items, huh? There's so many. Okay, it's a medrash. Take it or leave it, Carl. Either way, I'm going to have a good lunch, I told you. Okay. The three items Tamar names as pledges actually point to some measure of divinely inspired intuition on her part. Right? Not only are there signs of Yehuda's present status, they're also destined to become the hallmarks of future kings prophets, and judges. The signet ring is a direct reference to royalty. It will be worn by unborn kings in Yehuda's line on the right hands. The sash, the patil, is an allusion to the judges on the high court of the Sanhedrin. I didn't know that somebody walking in the street was somebody important. Not to bother him, he wore a certain colored sash around him, identified him as member of Sanhedrin. Okay? Who will tie their robes with a patil, a sash of cord or blue. And the staff points not only to Moshe Rabbeinu, but also to the future Mashiach, who's referred to as God's staff of strength. Yehuda would not have consented to part with these three possessions as collateral if he had any doubt that when he presented the goat to the harlot, she would return it to him, right? So that's a little bit on what she was asking for. She knew what she was asking for. Okay? She knew what she was asking for. It was like if somebody today asks you for your credit card, your license, all your ID. He was giving it up. He was giving it up. So Vataka Matelech, she gets up. She gets herself back into her widow's weeds. Notice she's not a Zonav anymore. She's an Isha. How did she go from a Zonah to an Isha in the text? Huh? Yeah. So, but Yehuda should certainly, because look, that's how what Yehuda says. She's an Isha. Look what Kira is going to say. Okay. He asked my neighbors. Where's the Kadesha? The people are correct. There was never a prostitute there. Never a prostitute there. Okay, so I want to talk about that now. I never found her. I couldn't find her. Let's let her keep whatever she has already. Why? Because I'm walking around and asking people, where's this Zona? Where's this Zona? What's it doing? It's embarrassing us. It's embarrassing Yehuda. It's embarrassing Yechiva. Yeah. Okay. All right. Look, you can learn it that way. All right. You can. Okay.
Marty?
A little play on words here, though. What is the difference between a Zona, which is what Yehuda originally thought she was, or Yachshavel is Zona, and a Kadesha? I mean, which is she? Is she a Zona, or is she a Kadesha?
It's a good day.
Or is she an Isha? There's three ways to describe her. Charlie? I can't hear you. Originally, she was a prostitute, Charlie wants to say.
Oh.
Our mission was to what? To recruit? So let me explain the thing. Okay. I didn't hear anything. Okay. A Zona. What other word can we put into Zona? A Zona is somebody that feeds, right? The restaurant feeds, the Zona. Okay. That's not for a Zona. Rachav was a Zona. Remember Rachav? And Chazal say that she had a restaurant. Right? That she wasn't a prostitute, she had a restaurant. So a Zona is a woman. as far as I could figure this out, is a woman. There are women who unfortunately have to prostitute themselves for food, right, to make a living, okay? They have children to raise and they have no way of getting money. That could be a zona, right? A kadesha, what's the difference of a kadesha? Correct. Kadesha is, there's some sort of sanctity to it. People have sex for spiritual or reasons, right? Which they just broke up some sort of a sex cult in New York with Nixon, that people were having sex because this was a religious kind of calling, all right? You talk about in Russia, remember that famous monk there, Rasputin? Well, that's what he did. You know, he had sexual for religious reasons. That's a kadesha. Yes, the Torah in Tuseitse tells us, "Lo siyeh kadesha b'nei Yisrael." Okay? You can't. A kadesha is more of a person who practices sex as a cult reason, for a cult reason. Okay? Right? Jeffrey Epstein
Oh, yeah, right.
was not a zona. He practices sex for whatever it was. Okay. So, but what happens if I'm reading the Torah and there's no nikudot in the Torah, right? Kuf Dalet Shin Hey. It could be what? Well, I'll soon show you a word ka'omim. We're going to get to the word ka'omim when she has twins. Okay? So maybe there was some level of kedusha in what she was doing. Maybe. Okay? Maybe. I'm not saying. Okay? Okay. All right. Which is the thing that happens when we talk about David and Bathsheba. If we do that again this year, okay, if the union of David and Bathsheba was so problematical, then Shlomo could never become king, and Malchut's based David, the whole line would have been interrupted. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Got to finish this quickly. Let me ask you a question. You ever notice in Bereshis, you have so many, and I don't know what the answer is. You can think about it when you go home. Why do we have so many deception stories in Bereshis? Bereshis is all filled with deception stories, starting all the way back with the snake. The snake deceives, Chava. Okay, Avram Avinu deceived Paro and Abimelech. Okay, Achosihi. Okay. Okay. All right. Yitzchak deceives Abimelech. Okay. Abraham and Yitzchak at the Akedah. Abraham, there's a certain amount of deception. He doesn't want to let on to Yitzchak what's happening. Okay. Yitzchak, Esav, Yaakov, Rivka, that whole story with the bracha. Deception story, right? Lavan and Yaakov. Another deception story with Leah, the wrong woman. Or a different woman, I shouldn't say. Shimon and Levi with Shechem. Deception story. Yehuda, Tamar, deception story. Yehuda and Yaakov, Hakerno, Aksonis, Bincho, Lo. Why are there so many deception stories in Bereshis? I don't know the answer. I don't want to know the answer. It's just aside. What? Okay. I personally, because of maybe my lack of understanding, I have problems with a lot of these deception stories. Okay, but let's go. Once again, remember I told you a thing about coats and goats? A couple of shiurim ago that all these stories are playing out, coats and goats. Yaakov with taking the bracha from Esav, a coat and a goat his mother cooked. Okay, what did they do with Yosef? They brought a coat, killed the goat, smeared the blood. Got another coat and goat story here, don't we? All right, we have a psil. We have a psil, we have a gedi, we have a gedi, and we have a psil. Right? So you got another coat and goat story. Yeah, that's just a song. Okay, so what? Okay. All right. So Vayikim Shlosh Chodoshim, Vayugad Yehuda Lemor, 3 months goes by, and Yehuda is told, Zon Setama Kalosecha. Right? Gamine Orol is Nunim. She's pregnant. Okay? Vayoma Yehuda Hotzi'u Avisisorei. We now got to Yehuda. Remember how we said that it was a Yerida constantly to Yehuda by Yered, Yehuda Me'esachav, that this is both a spiritual and a physical Yerida, okay? And he was showing absolutely no signs of the ability to lead, all right? Judge, jury, executioner, Hotzi'u Avisisorei, okay? Burn her. Where's her chance to defend herself? What's going to happen? How can he just do that? So if you look at one of your handouts on the back, I think it's number, the last one, 15. He was basing this on Vas Ish Kohen Kisechel Riznos, Esobia Himachaleles, or Eish Tisorek. Pashas Emo, what do they do if a daughter of a Kohen lives an immoral life, prostitutes herself? The penalty is rape. I told you who was Tamar. Remember one of the earlier shiurim 3 weeks ago when we started this? Who was Tamar? She was the daughter of a Kohen. Malchut Tzedek, remember I told you she was Malchut Tzedek's daughter. Malchut Tzedek, who Kohen the El Elyon. Okay? So that's why Yehuda jumped immediately. He probably knew who she was. He knew her background. He probably checked her out before, he agreed to the marriage with his first son, with the heir. Okay? So she's a Cohen's daughter, burn her. The question now becomes, this is the point where Yehuda has sunk to the lowest possible level he could do. Why? He knows it's Tamar. What is his obligation to her? He knows he has an obligation to her, doesn't he? He promised her that to wait until Sheila becomes bigger, of a marriageable age. Now he knows. Zonsa Toma Kalosefa. Now he knows. And in spite of the fact that he knows, correct, he doesn't know he's the father, okay? But he knows that, he had an obligation to her. Okay, that he was the cause of maybe her doing, to live as a life as an aguna is a very, very difficult. Thank God I don't know it, but it's people. I know one person who's a guna, and it's a terrible, terrible life. You can't get on with your life. So why is he willing to kill her so fast? Maybe she reminds him of all the avarice, of all the things he had done wrong. Right? He lied to her. He kept her chained up by not giving Sheila. You know what the best thing is? I'll wipe her out and the problem will go away. The problem will go away. I won't have the problem anymore. But what kind of a person would do something like that? Okay? Not to give her a chance to defend herself. Maybe she has some reason for what she did. And she did have a reason, right? Okay. So he wants to give it a death penalty. Let's say she embarrassed him. She embarrassed him. He felt that he was the guilty, that he was the person that was harmed. She's pregnant. She's embarrassed him. Remember, I'm Yehuda. I'm the judge of the town. I can sit in judgment. Who was she to embarrass me? Right? Okay. So there's a very, very interesting medrash that says the following. Sorry, it's a Gemara. I think it's the Gemara Sota. Daf Yod Omad Aleph, I think. I'm not sure. It might be that or it might be a medrash. So what's going on here? Tamar figures, I'm never going to get away with this. Eventually, my belly is going to show, right? I'm not going to sit in the house for 9 months. Ultimately, it's going to come out. How am I going to get away with it? So what she does, she says to herself, according to the Medrash tomorrow, I know someday they're going to come for me. They're going to come for me to take me out because it's going to be known that I'm pregnant. I can't get away with it, right? When they come for me, what I want you to do is I want you to take these 3 things that I have, the ring, the sash, and the stick, and I want you to run to Yehuda, to his house, and I want you to bring it to him, and I want you to give it to him. Okay? So the Gemara says that she had a servant that did this, and on the way, some evil malach didn't want this to happen, grabbed it from her, and when Hashem saw that this was going on, he sent another malach to get rid of that malach. So that's how Yehuda wound up with it. But if that medrash is true, then this whole thing once again had to be min hashamayim. What is it? What the Torah says that these things wound up in Yehuda's house. How did they get there? Tell me. You're reading the Torah. Tell me.
It says, she said.
How? She walked out and she sent it to him? It doesn't say that she showed it to them. She sent something to him. How did that thing get to him?
She said somebody. So what's the problem?
She what?
It says, she took this item and said.
Then how come Yehuda didn't know? How come he didn't know until later? He should have known right away. He didn't. Where did he think those things came from? She sent it to him, according to Chazal, as she was being taken out to be tied to the stake and burnt. She sent it to him. Take a look at this. All right, I have to, so take a look. I want to finish this up this week. I don't think I'm going to do it. Take a word, Himut says. But look at the spelling there. Look at the spelling of he. No, it's who. Look at the spelling. What is the Torah trying to tell us here? He mutzeis v'hi sholcho el chamil lemo. What is the he? Why is the 2 he spelled different?
That's only when I received it.
Anybody, you want to be so exact. Why did I spell the 2 words he differently?
Because there is a fear in the Bible all the time.
No. Look, 2 words different part. He mutzeis, v'hi sholcho. Look, they're spelled differently.
Okay, so what do you want?
I want to say that the Torah is telling us that the fact that Humut says he was responsible for all of this. Okay, that's why the Torah, okay?
What's woman said it couldn't be a good.
Okay? She was being taken out when she sent word to her father-in-law saying, I am pregnant by the man who owns these 3 things. Okay? I just wanted to ask you why the word he is spelled differently.
But it wouldn't make sense to say woman say.
Why wouldn't it? So why didn't the Torah spell the word the way it's supposed to be spelled? All right.
She was not accusing him.
So she says the famous words, Haker no, I got to stop with this. Haker no, identify. So the Torah is, giving us a hint that the he should somehow be understood as who, okay, and that he was responsible for it. Okay, he was responsible for this whole thing. Just we'll leave you one thought because I there's another share starting. I have to stop.
When it says stuff coming,
Okay. Haker no, Okay? The words Hakeranah are going to be the words, which we'll pick up next week, that resonate through this whole entire story. Hakeranah. Where has Yehuda heard or said these words before? By Yosef. What is she doing? She's using the exact same language that Yehuda used to deceive his father. Hakeranah, to show him to the extent the moral bankruptcy that he's fallen to. And I'll pick up on that idea next.